Hello there. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Chris Bennett. I am the CEO at Encore Recovery Solutions. We are a young adult specific intensive outpatient and extended care program located in Arlington, Virginia. And we work with young adults that struggle with substance use and co-occurring mental health disorders. First and foremost, want to give a big thank you and shout out to Shelley Young, the creator of this amazing opportunity, the Family Recovery Conference, which is really an opportunity for professionals and families alike to come together, to share ideas, and to learn from one another, and really being able to facilitate long-term health and well-being by the families really kind of taking full ownership and stake in their process alongside of a loved one who may be struggling with substances or in the process of early recovery or even long-term recovery for that matter. So just a big shout out and thank you to Shelley for doing so. And then also really to each and every one of you that's joining us today. I know well and good because I am in long-term recovery. I, of course, have a family who went through this process for 10 years before I ended up getting sober. How difficult it is for not only a family to really identify that there's a problematic situation going on, but then to really take hold of their involvement in the process. And I think the fact that you're sitting here today shows that you are an individual or you are a family or a friend or a colleague or somebody who has somebody in their life that you've said, look, the time is now for me to engage in the process of being able to, in an effective manner, help a loved one. What I'm here to talk about today with you guys is navigating the business of recovery. And what I want to do is share a little bit about my background first. So my first 3 years in my career, I've been doing this for 10 years now. I've been in the helping profession for 10 years. The first 3 years of my career, I worked in direct care. So I worked directly with clients in 2 different residential treatment centers. And so I became really knowledgeable about not only what the client's experience is going through treatment, but also the family's experience of not only going through the process of identifying a program to the process of an admission, and then really kind of walking with their loved one through the process of treatment as well as after treatment. After that, I founded a consulting firm that was focused on helping individual families identify resources and guiding them through the business of recovery. And so from early 2012 to early 2017, so 5 years, I spent fully traveling the country, working individually with families, helping them identify appropriate resources and helping them to really treatment plan in an effective manner. What that really looks like is that I spent the first several years of my career visiting several hundred programs around the United States. I built a network of individuals from owners of programs to therapists and doctors and consultants. And I really got to know the intricacies of this industry, which again, if you're here and you're listening to this presentation, you may fully be aware of how difficult it is to really look at and identify good resources and good people because there's so much out there. And so I really made it my business to not only know the resources, but to really know the characteristics of these resources and the personalities and the ethics and all of the different things that I really felt were important in being able to help families through the process of finding the right places and then helping their loved ones to access those services and to have a successful treatment experience. Within that process, of course, what we learn are that the number of organizations that we would like to work with is fairly small. Although there are about 21,000 providers in the United States, the number of quality resources is a number significantly less than that. So what I really want to focus on today is really helping you to be able to navigate the business of recovery. So I want to give you as much of the knowledge that I have in the years that I've done this to be able to say, we confidently and feeling empowered can make a decision as to what to do in a situation that's problematic. Where this always starts is this is always going to start with identifying a problem. Now, I don't have all the time in the world to go through how to identify a problem. So what I'm going to assume is that if you're listening to this, you've identified that there's a problematic situation. And that can look like a myriad of different things. It could be that we've found evidence that our teenage son or daughter is beginning to experiment with drugs and alcohol, all the way to we have found needles in our son or daughter's room, or my husband is beginning to act really erratically and not show up to work. But again, you've identified a problem to this point. Now, the key to this, and this is where I'm always going to start in talking to a family. The first thing that's going to happen when you guys identify that there's a problem going on is there's going to be a flood of emotion. Typically, it's going to be a combination of fear and anxiety and frustration and anger and guilt and shame. And your mind is going to be talking to you constantly. What could we have done better as parents? How could I have been a better wife? How could I have been a better husband? Whatever it may be. The key, before we get into any of this, is being able to slow down. When we're talking about getting somebody into treatment or helping identify resources, the key is that we're going to be investing a pretty significant amount of time, energy, and money into this process. So what we want to do is obviously make sure that what we're doing is being able to act in a rational, unbiased, and objective manner when we're going through this process. And it's very difficult to do that when we have emotions tied into it. All right. So first and foremost, totally recognizing that even if you are able to step out of the emotion and really be able to say, okay, without emotion, let's really look at what the problem is, and let's work within a process that Chris has helped us identify. What are our next steps? So if I was working with you, I would be saying, look, take a breath. We're going to work through this together. Slow down, do our research. Okay. The key for this is a lot of times when families find out there's a real problem, they jump into a crisis mode. And so what happens when we're in a mode of crisis is we're not making great decisions. And you'll probably recognize this across your whole life, not just with a situation like this with substance abuse or mental illness, that when we're reacting to situations, we're not making very good decisions. It's when we're really kind of being able to slow down, to run things past each other, to regulate our emotions, and then to walk step by step through processes that we're really able to, at that point, say, this is something we're feeling really confident and really inspired in. So what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about the ways that treatment centers get you to see them. And so that's really going to be from a marketing standpoint. How does a program get in front of you, to what happens when you pick up the phone and call, to what are the different options you have for treatment, to then what are the services that you really should be looking for, and then how do you create a process with all that information that really is going to be efficient and effective at helping a loved one. So where I want to really start with this is, how does a treatment center identify you as a potential family that they want to work with? So there's a variety of different things. And what you'll hear me talk about through the day today is you'll hear me talk about deceptive practices or illegal practices. And then you'll hear me talk about factual or quality practices when it comes to marketing. Okay. And there's a variety of different things going on within our industry that I'm not going to pull punches with you. I've never been that guy, so I'm not going to start today. I'm going to give you the factual information. Some of it may be tough to hear, but again, better for you to walk away from this session completely educated and saying, look, I feel at this point like I have a really good grasp on what's ethical care, what is unethical care, what's illegal or legal, and I'm feeling really good about the process that we're about to engage with in. So you've identified there's a problem with a loved one. From here, in our age today, the first thing that I predict most people do, and this is again because of the age we live in, is they either pick up A, their smartphone, or B, their computer. They go onto Google or Bing or another search site, and they immediately search for the problem that they think they're having. So you're going to type in drug treatment, Arlington, Virginia. All right. Now, there's a couple different things that are going to happen at this point. You're going to get different organizations that have massive budgets. So you're talking about organizations that have 5, 6, 10, 15 different treatment centers. They might be able to devote $100,000 or so per month into what we would call search engine optimization. And so just to recognize that a lot of the programs that are going to kind of pop up on that first search to the very top, excuse me, are going to be organizations that we're really able to pay for them to be up there. Now, that doesn't mean they're good. It doesn't mean they're bad. Just again, it's just some information from you. The other thing to really be aware of is when you search, and we'll use the search I talked about. So if you search drug treatment, Arlington, Virginia, you may see something that pops up and says, we're a treatment center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or Austin, Texas. So again, just be aware before you click on links that if you're looking for something in a specific area, I can pay as a treatment center owner to target you while you're looking in a different area. So again, just some very kind of basic things to pay attention to. The other thing is on your TV. So, you may be searching, you may be sitting at your dining table, it may be 10 or 11 p.m. at night because this has just happened and you're really worried and you can't sleep. All of a sudden on your TV, you hear an ad that says, are you struggling with substance use? Are you struggling with addiction? Are you alone? And all of a sudden you look at the TV and you see an ad for a treatment center. And it's got an 800 number and it says, here's the insurances we take and here's the number to call. And your services may be covered in full. The thing to really be aware of when it comes to commercials and TV is that there are two things. You have one side of treatment centers that are actually marketing for themselves. So you have a treatment center that has the name of the treatment center on the ad. And it says, this is where we are. We're located in Pennsylvania. Here's the name of our program. Here's how long we've been around. This is what we do. This is why we do it. Here's the 800 number. Okay? That's pretty straightforward. The one to be aware of and be cautious of is the one that doesn't say that they're a treatment center. And it doesn't say that they're affiliated with a treatment center. And it has no indication of the treatment center that it's trying to sell you. It simply says, do you have a problem with addiction? Do you have insurance? Here's an 800 number to call. Now, that's basically what we call a referral service. So that organization has contracted with 50 or 100 different treatment centers and has said to those treatment centers, for every call that we get you, you're going to pay us $100, for example. So what you want to be aware of is that when you're calling a place that does not identify who they are or the treatment center they're with or where they are or any of that, you are effectively calling into a third party who at that point is going to send your call to a program that sounds like it may fit. But again, when you call that 800 number, you are not going to be talking to a certified counselor or a licensed therapist. You're going to be talking to a salesperson who's most likely going to say something to the effect of, what type of insurance do you have? And then they're going to take that insurance and say, what programs that are contracted with us take this insurance? Then they're going to send you to one of those programs. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't call the number. I would say be highly, highly cautious, because what we consider in this industry is that it is a deceptive marketing practice, because you are actually targeting an individual that's in a state of crisis, and you're not giving them all the information that they need. So again, when you're on your computer and you've done a Google search for drug treatment, and then you hear this ad on TV, just be aware that if the TV ad is not talking about where they are and who they are specifically and why they do what they do, and there's not the name and the logo of the treatment center, that most likely you are being filtered in to somebody who is selling you to another treatment center. We would consider that highly deceptive and unethical marketing practice. So you're sitting on the computer, you've Googled drug treatment in Arlington, Virginia. A bunch of websites come up, probably a couple pages on Google. What the heck do you do now, right? How do you know if this is a good place? How do you know if they work with your insurance? How do you know what they cost, if they're an effective service? So where I'd start with this is simply the website. Number one, when you click on a website, what do the pictures look like? And not the quality of the pictures. I think they should have good quality pictures on a website for sure. But what are the pictures? So if I'm a program and I'm located in Manhattan, I should probably have pictures of Manhattan on my website. I probably shouldn't have pictures of the beach or the mountains, because ultimately Manhattan is not next to the beach and it's not in the mountains. So really important is to be able to identify, where is this treatment center? So Typically, you should be able to find an address for this treatment center specifically on a contact page or an inquiries page or an information page or a frequently asked questions page. Somewhere you should be able to say, this is the address of this treatment center. At that point, the pictures on the website should reflect a pretty good indication of not only the location, but the things that they do. So that's, that's a big, kind of starting point right there. And again, if you look for a treatment center in Arlington, Virginia, and there's pictures of the beach, you should run the other way. The second is really being able to look at the staff of the treatment center. And so you are sending or potentially looking at or exploring a treatment option for a loved one because of the staff. You're not looking at it because of the beautiful website or the great location or whatever it is. You're looking at the staff. So number one is, if you cannot find staff or a staff page on a website, you should run the other way. And again, this could be under our leadership, our staff, our family, our team, whatever it is. But you should be able to see who's running the place. Who are the therapists at the place? Who are the ancillary staff? Who are the folks that are really making sure this place runs in an effective and efficient manner? Do they have bios? Do they have credentialing? These are things you're really going to want to see on a website. Lastly, I would say with a website is being able to identify, what does the place do? You should be able to fairly easily not have to make 100 clicks on a site, be able to see, what does this place do? What types of services do they offer? And how clear are they about the services that they do offer? And that should typically be, under a section, how we can help, what we do, a provider section. A lot of times, treatment centers will actually create a page on their website that other providers or people that work in the industry can review, that has some more specific industry-specific terminology and modalities of care and things like that. So, you should be able to look at a website and say, does this place look accurate in terms of the way that it's marketing itself? Can I locate their staff? Does it have an address of where this place actually is? Are they inviting me to come see this place at any point? And can I learn about what this place is actually doing? And I think those are key. And again, a website is going to be a first kind of indication into the world of treatment at this time. Before I move on, and the last kind of piece I want to work through with the idea of deceptive marketing is, there are folks out there today that we call patient brokers. And what these individuals are is typically they're people that are in early recovery themselves. They went through a treatment center, and the treatment center said to them, look, we'll give you $1,000 for every person that you can bring to the treatment center. You cannot take kickbacks in this industry. Kickbacks are illegal. So the quid pro quo of, if I, Chris, send a referral to another place and I get paid for that, that is an illegal practice. Unfortunately, there are a variety of different individuals and programs around the country that are engaging in this type of practice, ultimately for a revenue perspective. So if for whatever reason you come across an individual that says something like, what type of insurance do you have? I think I can help get your loved one help. You might want to be cautious. A consultant or somebody who is going to operate in a legal and ethical manner is going to have a fairly intensive assessment initial phone call with you. The question of insurance may or may not even come up in that conversation. They would then send you a contract as a formed limited liability or corporation. There's going to be a legal element to them engaging with you in terms of you compensating them for their time from a consulting perspective and helping them identify a program. And so again, if you run into somebody that says, look, you don't need to worry about paying me, I'm just in the business of helping, you want to be really cautious, because most likely that individual is going to be financially motivated for treatment. Now, also important to note that if you were to call me and say, I've got a son or daughter that needs help, and for whatever reason, after we assessed them and figured out that they weren't going to make sense at Encore, we would, of course, help you identify additional resources. Because from an ethics perspective, we're not going to leave a family out there to dry. We want to help you find the appropriate resources and not put you in a position where you're having to go back to Google and look for more. So always highly encourage, not only working with, a group of consultants that has a legitimate website, has a legitimate company, does a legitimate assessment and evaluation process, and is not affiliated with a treatment center from a financial perspective. So again, those are just some things to be aware of from the marketing side of things. And again, from an accurate or ethical standpoint, a treatment center should have their staff on the website. They should have accurate pictures and videos. They should, answer emails and phone calls quickly. They should have, their address. A website is really, in my belief, an indication into the transparency of the organization as a whole. So if you feel like, look, I've read this and I know where they are, I know who the staff is, I feel really comfortable, there's an element of all that, then again, sounds like a good, place to at least begin to explore. Next, of course, is a phone call. So you've reviewed a website, you are saying, look, this sounds like something that might be helpful for us. It sounds like they address some of the things that we're really looking for. What do? You're going to pick up the phone. Couple things to be aware of. Some treatment centers, you're going to be talking to somebody directly working for and with and at the treatment center. So you're going to be speaking to somebody who is sitting in the treatment center currently. Or some of the larger organizations work with what they call call centers. So sometimes when organizations grow and get bigger, they centralize all the initial phone calls into a specific location. So they may have an office. It may be at the treatment center, close to the treatment center. It also could be hundreds of miles away. And so you just want to be aware, like, who are you talking to and where are they? I think it's important to know that if you're talking to a treatment center in Southern California, that you're also speaking to their call center, which is in Texas. Just good to know these things. The key for me is when you're calling a program, a lot of times an indication for me on the quality of the organization is that initial phone call. How are you doing today? Tell me about what's going on and how we may be able to help. Those are some things that I would want to hear in my first phone call with a treatment center. Things I would not want to hear within the first 5 minutes of a phone call would be, what type of insurance do you have? Our treatment center costs this. Do you have that money? If people are talking to you about the finances as the first thing, or within the first few minutes of a phone call with you, it should be a real indication that this is not a place that is concerned with my loved ones' health and well-being, or the health and well-being of my family as a whole. This is a place that's looking to bill my insurance or to take my money. So you want somebody who's going to be able to, you're going to be able to talk about what's going on. They're going to ask you lots of questions. One of the key things, and I think I forgot to mention this at some point, that I'm going to have a key takeaways PDF for all of you. So you're going to be able to kind of refer back to a lot of this in writing, take it with you, print it out. Obviously, you'll be able to access it if you ever need it. But that'll be helpful in being able to kind of look at this process, on paper as well. So a couple things with insurance is that there is legal insurance billing and there is illegal insurance billing. And what we mean by this is that, look, we're going to bill you for the services we provide, and we're going to be accurate in billing those services, completely legal. A lot of places at this point will actually bill for services that were not rendered. So the key to this is being able to, insurance is a whole thing that I could easily do a several hour presentation on. The thing for you to really be aware of is that there is fraudulent insurance billing that goes on in this industry. Okay. I'll talk about it a little more when we get into the treatment side of things, but just be aware. And, the easiest way to be aware of this is when you're looking at an explanation of benefits, where your loved one's in treatment and you get an explanation of benefits and the billed charges and what's been paid. You'll get that documentation directly from your insurance company. It'll be pretty easy to kind of look at, what is my son, daughter, brother, sister, mom, dad receiving versus what's being billed and how is it being billed? and how much is being billed. The other thing with insurance is that it is illegal to waive your deductible or your copays. So if you talk to a treatment center and they say you have a $3,000 deductible, but don't worry about paying it because we'll cover that, that is illegal, which means that that treatment center will not only be billing your insurance illegally in the front end by not taking your deductible, most likely they're going to be doing more shady practices on the back end as well. So that also feeds into the idea of incentives. So at this point, if you've had a decent phone call and you're saying, look, I've reviewed the website, I've had a good phone call. Now, incentives are also illegal and highly unethical with getting someone into treatment. What this means is that I cannot, as a treatment center owner, incentivize you to come to my program in any way, shape, or form outside of the fact that you believe this is a great resource for a loved one or for yourself. What that means is that I cannot say, I'll waive your deductible, that I'll give you free housing, that I will buy you a plane ticket, that we will get everything that you need when you get here, that we will take you shopping for all the stuff that you need, that we will buy you a return ticket home once your month is done. We cannot incentivize you in any way. So if for whatever reason you're ever on a phone call with a provider and there's any type of incentive, and typically it's going to be kind of sly, it's going to be a sales tactic, it's going to be when they feel you slipping and saying, I don't know if we can afford it. I don't know if this is the right place. We need to look into some other things. You're going to get somebody in a predatory role who may say something to the effect of, you know what? It sounds like the deductible is too much to be covered. We'll handle that for you. You don't have to pay the deductible. And don't worry about your copay. Or everything else works out and you say, well, hey, I'm not sure how we're going to get them there. It's a little tough to do X, Y, and Z. It's expensive. They're last minute flights. And they say, we'll get the flight for you. We will pay for that for you. That is illegal. So anytime anybody is creating any type of incentive for your loved one to enter treatment, it is illegal. You need to run the other way. Okay. So again, a quality organization is going to talk about their services with you. They're going to transparently look at your insurance. They're going to give you an accurate representation of what the cost is going to look like. The fact is that commercial insurance today typically is not going to cover treatment at 100%. You're going to have a deductible. You're going to have a copay. And typically the insurance is not going to cover the cost of the program because commercial insurance is just not paying what they should be paying for this type of care at this time. So just being aware of all those types of practices on the front end. Questions to ask. And this is a whole another hour-long type of session. I'm going to put this in my key takeaways, but there's really kind of a key list of questions that when you're talking to a program, you should be able to ask them. And you should get quick, transparent, easy, and effective answers to. They shouldn't have to look anything up. They shouldn't have to ask any questions. Now, the only time that I would say someone would have to ask a question is if somebody's new to the company and says, hey, that's a really specific question that you have. Let me go ahead. I'm making note of that. I'm going to ask somebody and I'm going to ask my supervisor. I'll get right back to you with that answer. That's the only time that I would be okay with somebody not having a pretty clear and direct answer to you. But again, some of these questions are going to be, tell me about your treatment philosophy. Tell me about your therapist to client ratio. How many clients are on their caseload at a time? What are the credentialing of your staff? What's the ratio of group therapy to individual therapy? Do you have a psychiatrist or a general practitioner on staff? So again, a lot of questions. I'll talk more about those in our key takeaways that you'll have with you. But again, when you're on this initial phone call, coming into it prepared and saying, this is what I need to ask, and this is what I need to feel comfortable with as a family member looking at this program. Because again, as a family member, typically, what do we ask? That's a question I got all the time and I still get. What am I supposed to ask? How do I know if this is a good place? So I'm going to give you those questions so that you can go ahead and ask these programs and feel really, really confident in the process. Next, I want to talk about treatment itself. All right. So families go, what do? We found this problem. but there's not only all these programs to work with, but there's all different kinds of treatment, right? So really, I'm going to walk you through the types of treatment. So we have outpatient treatment. We have outpatient programs. We have intensive outpatient programs. We have partial hospitalization programs. We have extended care programs. We have residential programs. We have inpatient programs. So I hope you're feeling a little overwhelmed. If you're not, good, because you've probably been through this before. But my gosh, how do I know what my 19-year-old son needs? How do I know what my 26-year-old daughter needs? The key to this, and again, I don't have enough time. I'm going to throw it in my key takeaways, and I'll identify some resources to help kind of identify when you're looking into the level of care, what makes the most sense. Outpatient, to start with, is really just something as simple as a psychiatrist or a therapist. That's something where you're going to see them once a week, maybe twice a week, but you're seeing somebody purely on an outpatient basis, and that's really all that's being offered. If you identify an outpatient program, you're really looking at something between, call it 1 and 9 hours per week of services. So an outpatient program would be able to provide maybe a little bit of group therapy, some psychiatry, some individual therapy. But for the most part, an outpatient program will be accessed by somebody that is fairly stable and has multidimensional things that need to be addressed, but is fairly stable enough to maintain employment, to maintain school, family relationships, can stay in the home or they have safe and supportive housing, and they're able to access services kind of as needed. An intensive outpatient program is anything between 9 and 19 hours of services per week. Typically what you find with what we call an IOP program is that you're going to see it's either 3, 4, or 5 days per week for 3 hours per day. Now, again, this level of care is really indicated for individuals that are in a position where they can either maintain or they can obtain employment, academic opportunities. They have decently stable family relationships and ties to the community, where ultimately they don't need to go somewhere or to stop doing these things like working or going to school, but they still need to access services in a decently intense way. And again, this would really be highlighted by a multidimensional approach of saying, this is about not only substance use, but there's some mental health things and maybe some dietary things and some vocational things. And we really need to kind of bring all this together. The next thing you really have is what we call partial hospitalization. Now, partial hospitalization varies, but typically it's 20 hours or more per week. So typically at this level of care, partial hospitalization, it doesn't mean you're going into a hospital. I know it's a little misleading in terms of the terminology, but what it really says is that the individual who needs to access this level of care is at this time really not in a position where they should be working, they should be in school, they should be volunteering, or they have some really kind of maladaptive patterns currently with family and friends and the community and really their integration. What partial hospitalization typically is going to look like is something between 5 and 7 hours per day for 5 days per week. So it really is, it's really almost, if you think about it, like in place of work or school. It's somebody's going to be actively engaged in treatment for basically a day. What you'll hear partial hospitalization be called as well is day treatment. So you'll hear the terminology kind of go back and forth. Some people will say day treatment, PHP, partial hospitalization. But again, this is really for somebody who at this time is going to really struggle with some of the other obligations they may have in life. Extended care is kind of a combination. So I want to say about 10 to 12 years ago, what folks realized is that there were really a lot of individuals that were either coming out of residential treatment, which we'll talk about next, or they didn't really need residential treatment, but they needed something in between an IOP or a PHP and residential. So what was created was this level of treatment called extended care, which is really a combination of safe, supportive, supervised housing with IOP or PHP level clinical services. So what that looks like is somebody would live in a home that's typically supervised either with a house manager or 24-hour around the clock staff. And then you'd be accessing anywhere between 9 and 25 hours a week of clinical services in combination. And so you have the safe, supportive housing, yet you have independence, because at this level of care, you're really, again, really looking towards maintaining or gaining employment and doing these different things, but you really needed more than just coming from home to the office. You needed that safe, supportive housing situation. The level above that we would consider residential treatment, which in my experience and for your knowledge is really that somebody needs to be physically separated from their environment because they ultimately are not capable of not using or not drinking without that type of support. So this is typically when we say, look, there's a program an hour and a half away, and you're going to live in a home and it's going to be supervised 24/7, and you're going to do nothing but treatment. And a lot of times that's where you're accessing services for detoxification, for not only physical withdrawal, but psychological withdrawal, but also really helping stabilize. And so as I talked about extended care, you enter residential, and then you can transition down really to extended care. And I'll talk a little bit more about the transition phases of treatment as well. So, and then lastly, you really have what we would consider an inpatient stay. And an inpatient stay is really going to be focused on stabilization. This is really typically where there are significant co-occurring kind of mental health issues. You could be experiencing that your loved one is experiencing psychosis or mania or extreme depression or suicidality, or they've attempted suicide. Again, inpatient stays are really going to be geared towards really helping not only to provide detox services and helping to get substances physically out of the body, but also really to stabilize mental health symptoms. So the key with understanding treatment to me is really understanding the continuum of care. And when we talk about continuum of care, when we talk about substance use disorder, this is a chronic illness that is encapsulated and highlighted a lot of times by lapse or relapse. Most scientific studies are showing that it takes the brain about 18 months to fully heal from active substance use. So what this really means is that the longer we keep somebody engaged in a process of treatment or tethered to treatment, which is key, the better chance they have of long-term sobriety as well as health and wellness, which is, again, really, really key. So when we talk about the continuum of care, what we're referring to is all of the things I just described, from outpatient all the way to inpatient treatment, is that the most effective way for someone to recover is by helping them transition from one level of care to the next in a really effective, efficient manner. So What this means is that when somebody goes to residential treatment, say they go to 28 days at a residential treatment center, they are going to need services afterwards. This is an illness that does not get cured in 28 days. 28 days is typically going to be a great opportunity for somebody to stabilize. Most programs should, and that's the key here, right? So your understanding and education and knowledge of this continuum of care is going to be key. Programs should and should be mandated, in my opinion, to provide recommendations for what's next. So what's next, if it's residential treatment, might be that they say, they can go home, but they need to engage in intensive outpatient treatment for the next several months while, that they're supporting their transition home. Then they should transition to outpatient for another couple of months, if not 6 months or so. So because every situation is different and every family is unique, every client we work with is unique, there's not one standard way to do this. But as a family member or a friend or colleague, whoever's listening to this, you should be looking at what is the place that he's at recommending next. So even at intensive outpatient or outpatient, we would be saying to somebody, look, when you're done with us, even if that means that you're done with us and you're only coming 2 hours a week or 1 hour a week, we still want you to see an outpatient therapist for X amount of time. So when you're engaged in this process of treatment and when you've got somebody into treatment, you should be, as a family member, saying, what's next? What's next? Because that's what we really need to be looking at. This is not a one and done. This is not something that we go to one place and it's over. There's got to be this opportunity to transition through this continuum of care. And we'll talk more about this kind of, towards, within the next few minutes about really how do we kind of pull all this together and create an effective process. Next is services. So talking about all those levels of treatment, that's great. And I hope that you feel a little bit more like you understand this, as well as, again, we'll kind of refer back to the key takeaways PDF so that you can kind of do your own research on what some of these levels of care actually mean and what would be indicated in terms of problematic behaviors that would indicate, intensive outpatient makes sense or residential makes sense. The services you really should be looking at, though, when we're talking about substance use disorder treatment, first and foremost are clinical. And what I mean by clinical are what are the types of therapies and who is providing them at the program and what is their philosophy clinically. So a program should be able to very quickly talk about their philosophy with you. They should say, this is what we believe in, this is why we believe in it, and this is the way that we treat it. And this is who we use to treat it. And these are the effective ways that we have found in treating it. So a lot of this can seem, whoa, this is really overwhelming and I don't understand clinical. This would be like me going to the doctor in a sense and asking the brain surgeon, how does he do his job? That would be a pretty difficult conversation for me to have because I feel like I wouldn't understand it. The key really here is that a key quality provider who's going to be providing these services to a loved one are going to be using credentialed folks to provide those services. So let's look at the different credentialing that you would have within a treatment center. So you can have counselors. So counselors are typically depending state by state. Every state has a different requirement and different laws around this. Certain states require a bachelor's degree to get a counseling credential. Some states don't. California, for example, where I was for a long time, requires a 36-hour college course. And then you have to work in the field for a certain amount of time and you have to take a test and then you have your credential as an addiction counselor. So really what I would say is that the baseline folks kind of who should be providing services in this industry are counseling level folks. The next really from that would be all of our folks that are at a master's level. And so with a master's degree, folks should either be in a process where they have A, graduated school, and B, are either seeking licensure or they are currently licensed. And so with a master's degree, what you're going to find is you're going to get marriage and family therapists or MFTs. You're going to get licensed professional counselors or LPCs. You're going to get social workers, which have a few different designations depending state by state, but typically licensed clinical social worker. And these are typically, again, the three master's level types of folks that you're going to see. You may see here and there some folks with a credential called an MAC, which is a Master's in Addiction Counseling, which is actually a specific credential to the Hazelden Graduate School. And so again, Hazelden, for those of you who don't know, one of the oldest treatment centers in the United States. I believe it actually is the oldest treatment center in the United States. They actually have a graduate program. And so they actually do a full master's level addiction counseling program and certification course for folks as well. So, and then of course you have the doctoral level folks. So you have either a PsyD or a PhD. Basically, both of them are clinical psychologists. Typically, PhDs are a little more research focused, depending on the program itself or the school that they went to. PsyDs are a little more clinically focused. But again, at Encore, we have 3 PhDs because we love the school that these guys have come out of, and we really believe in their clinical skill, of course, with their research as well. So I wouldn't say, one versus the other, but really to be aware of. And then again, you have a variety of different doctoral folks, more on the medical side, where you have psychiatrists and general practitioners and things of that nature as well. So, when you're talking to a program about clinical, you really want to know who's going to be working with my loved one, who's going to be working with my son or daughter, who's going to be their primary therapist, and what's their credentialing, and what type of schooling do they have. These are questions that you should be asking and that you need to be assertive about, because otherwise you're going to get in there and you're going to find out that 3 months later they've been working with somebody who has a bachelor's degree, and that might not make you as happy as you could. So clinically, always asking about that. Skills is an important piece as well. Like, what types of skills is my loved one going to be learning? Because again, when we're talking about substance use disorder, we're talking about a really multifaceted disorder. This isn't just about the substance use. Actually, it's not really at all about the substance use. Because for individuals that are abusing or dependent upon substances, they're really using that as a way to cope with the way that they experience the world when they're not under the influence. And so a lot of times we're looking at skills, and that may be from a vocational perspective or dietary perspective, academic, financial, depending on the program. Now, again, if somebody's in residential treatment for 28 days, I don't expect them to be working on vocational skills. They need to be stabilizing, detoxing, things like that. But in outpatient, intensive outpatient, extended care, you should be really saying, what types of skills is my loved one going to be working on? And who's going to be providing that to them? Again, very similar to clinical. Who are these people providing those skills? Big one for everyone on this call, family. What do these places do for the families? You're going to hear, if you haven't already heard, that substance use disorder is a family disease. It's always baffled me a little bit when providers say that, because then we say, well, what are we doing for the families? If this is a family disease, then what are we doing for the families? So one of the questions I would be asking in your shoes is, what do you do for families? That should be a very clear-cut question with a very clear-cut answer. This is exactly what we do. This is why we do it. Now, again, depending on the family, there may, certain things may be different from your family versus another, because again, families have individual and different and unique needs. But treatment centers that you should be working with, especially for young adults and adolescents, must have family. And so I want to really stress this, that if for whatever reason you're exploring a program and they say, well, we might be able to do something for you guys if you end up coming into town, or, we don't really have kind of a dedicated family set up. So if you get answers like that, you should not be working with these places. And again, when we're talking about family recovery, we're really talking about the fact that families change in conjunction with the way your loved one changes. It's just the way that human beings work. And so there's nothing wrong with you. I think it's really important for families to know that like, I by no means am saying, oh my gosh, you have all this work to do because something's wrong with you. That's not the case. But what happens is that you change as a result of your loved one changing too. And because that's what becomes the new normal. And so as your loved one is changing, you're engaging in that process basically parallel to them. And so the key here is when we're talking about the family engaging in this process is really saying, okay, I know that in order for my loved one to get well, I've got to be a part of that process. So what do I need to do? Now, you're not going to know what you need to do. You're going to need some professional guidance. So again, an organization should very easily be able to say, this is what we do, how we do it, when we do it. And we basically are inviting and highly encouraging you to participate and attend. And then community, right? Like, what is this organization doing to better the community or to help your loved one reintegrate? Because again, as you probably well know sitting here, this is not just about someone going to a treatment center and then coming back home and everything's okay. There's this opportunity to really integrate into the community, whether that's by work, school, support groups, all these different avenues to help your loved one re-engage as a responsible, accountable member of their community. What we consider this, and again, this will be in the key takeaways, is when we look at everything from this holistic perspective, which is really what I just described, and we're really trying to look at, you're really wanting to work with an organization that's saying this is not just about the medical or the clinical or the therapy. This is about the whole individual, which includes his community, his family, his skills, all of this. We're really talking about something that's been around for a really long time, which is called a recovery-oriented system of care. And you can easily Google that, look that up, ton of information on it. But it is a very holistic approach to looking at treatment for substance use disorder. Now, boy, we've talked a lot. And I would say that this is the first time I've actually recorded a presentation. Typically, when I do presentations, I like to be way more interactive. And so I think I've talked a whole lot. And there's probably questions and all kinds of stuff. But what I want to do is kind of try to tie all of this together for you in the last few minutes. So we went through a variety of things in this call. We went through some of the marketing and advertising practices, to kind of what happens when you first pick up the phone and you're talking to somebody in the treatment industry, to what are the different levels of care that are out there, what are the services that we should kind of be expecting. And so now it's like, well, all that sounds great, Chris, but really, what's the process here? Okay. So I'm going to try to break this down as simply as I can. Let's use another example. So you've come home, your daughter's taken the car, you don't know where she is. She shows back up at 6 a.m. She is clearly intoxicated. And this has been a pattern of behavior going on for 6 months. Maybe she has stopped going to school. She stopped going to college classes. You're starting to see her spend time more and more with new friends. Some of her old friends are no longer around, if not, maybe have expressed a little concern about what's going on. And you're saying, what do I do from here? First key again, being able to identify what emotions you're feeling right now. Am I experiencing a high level of anxiety or worry or frustration or anger? These emotions are all okay, but they cannot drive the process of helping your daughter. So, okay, we know there's a problem at 6 a.m. You've probably been woken up. You've probably either been up all night or you just woke up. So you've got very little sleep in you. What do you do now? Big question. My first thing is going to say, what is really going on with your daughter? And I think you probably have a better indication of this than you may be able to see right now because you're clouded with the emotion. So it may not just be the substance use. You may say, look, I've known for many, many years that my daughter was bullied. I know that my daughter really struggled with anxiety. I know that when we moved, it was really difficult for her to transition when we moved when she was in 6th grade. I know that social situations have been very tough. So compiling as much information, even if it's just in your head, I encourage you to write it down because again, you just, when emotions are really heightened, very difficult to kind of deal with it. Writing it down. At this point, hopefully you're pulling out my key takeaways and you're reviewing questions to ask and you're reviewing what the process looks like as a whole. But you're sitting down and saying, okay, this is where we're at. Who do I need to talk to? Again, if you have somebody that's a trusted confidant or somebody trusted within this industry, feel free to pick up the phone. Again, if you're participating in this family recovery conference, I can tell you, you can pick up the phone. You can call me. You can call probably any of the other providers or Shelly specifically and get some pretty good knowledge of at least, hey, here's who to talk to. Here's who we think would be good to talk to. So again, I think that's the number one. Feeling like you have an in to the industry is always going to be your best bet. But if for whatever reason you're sharing this with a friend or it's somebody that doesn't feel comfortable with that, again, you can go online. You can start to review different programs. Being very specific about what you're looking for and where you're looking for it. Making sure that it's accurate and effective marketing, and it's not deceptive and illegal marketing practices. Being really cautious around that. Again, reviewing the website, picking up the phone. Once you pick up the phone, who are you talking to? Are you talking to somebody that's a certified or credentialed counselor, a licensed therapist, or are you talking to a salesperson or call center? At that point, what questions do you have? Again, you've got those questions on my key takeaways, but what's your treatment philosophy? What are the credentialing of your staff? Tell me about who's on staff. Tell me about your patient to staff ratio and your therapist caseloads. All important information for you to have. How do you treat my daughter's specific issues? The things that you've been able to talk about, the social issues, the anxiety, the difficulty with transitioning to a new school, the bullying, the substance use and alcohol use, whatever it is, they should be able to very clearly talk to you about that. How do you bill, right? So are you submitting your insurance? If so, making sure that they're not offering any incentives to come into their programming. And then are they identifying the appropriate level of care? Are they saying that this person needs detox? How are they assessing for detox? How are they assessing for the level of care? And then what services are they providing? And what are they doing for families? What are they doing clinically? What types of skills are they going to be offering? What type of community integration? And then from there, it's a process of getting your loved one into treatment. Lastly, a couple of things I got to talk about is because, again, if for whatever reason, at some point you say, this is a process that I do not feel comfortable embarking on my own, again, reach out to anybody associated with this conference. I know any of us would be willing to help anytime. Number two, there are consultants that work in this industry that do nothing, similar to my former life, that do nothing but help families individually, that have no financial or otherwise affiliation with treatment centers, and they can objectively and unbiasedly guide you in an appropriate way. If you ever have any questions or you ever want any of those resources, you feel free to reach out to myself. And I can definitely point you in the right direction of a consultant that will work with your family and really kind of guide you through the process. But number one, advocate for yourself. All too often I see families that for some reason they get stuck in this position of where they're trusting the treatment providers 100% without asking questions or being assertive. And so advocating for yourself and being assertive are incredibly important pieces for me. All too often, I'm telling a family, the treatment center should be telling you why they're making this recommendation. The treatment center should be indicating why they're recommending this next place after discharge. If they're recommending more time at the treatment center, they need to be clearly telling you why. All too often, I think we get stuck in this place of fear and the place of, well, I don't know. So how can I ask the question if I don't know what the answer is supposed to be? And so again, this could just be, I don't feel like I'm getting enough communication, to I don't feel like the treatment center is calling me enough. I don't feel like they're involving my family enough. I'm wondering if I can do X, Y, or Z, if they have visitation, whatever it may be. I encourage you to advocate and be assertive for yourself. One of the key things, and I say this, and I'm going to tell you now, you're paying for the service. It's not the other way around. You're paying for a level of service. So you need to be able to be in a place of confidence and inspiration that, look, this is a place that I feel like, I can get communication from. They have good customer service. I'm getting what I feel like I need. I feel like my loved one's getting what they need. And ultimately, this feels like something that's going to provide hope to my family. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that this is a ton of information. I really hope to kind of break it down in an easy way for you to review in a simple manner. I would definitely encourage you to feel free to share this with anybody. that you feel like it might be helpful for. And I will always be a resource. So you feel free to reach out to me anytime. And thank you again for joining us today.